Dust and smoke filled the sky above Colony 9. The air tasted like metal and ash, and the ground shook every few seconds from distant explosions. The evacuation alarms had been screaming for hours, and the streets were crowded with people running toward the transport station. Rian ran with his little daughter Mira in his arms, his boots pounding on the cracked pavement. Mira's tiny fingers clutched the collar of his worn jacket, and her face was buried against his shoulder. "Just hold on," he whispered to her. "We're almost there." The station's giant metal doors were wide open, revealing the towering transport ship inside. Its hull gleamed under the harsh floodlights, and a long line of desperate colonists waited to get aboard. Security guards in dark uniforms stood along the path, trying to keep order. But there was no order here, only fear. People shouted, pushed, and shoved, some dragging bags of belongings, others carrying children or holding onto the hands of the elderly. The air was filled with voices, pleading, crying, arguing. "Please, let my family through." They said it's full. There has to be room. Rian forced his way forward, holding Mira close so she wouldn't be jostled. His heart raced. The ship was the last scheduled to leave the colony before the enemy fleet arrived. If they didn't make it on board, there would be no escape. When he finally reached the boarding gate, a tall officer stepped in front of him, blocking the way. "Manifest is full," the officer said, shaking his head. "We're at capacity. No more civilians." Rian's chest tightened. "Please," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "She's only 7. She can't stay here." The officer's eyes softened as he looked at Mira, but his tone stayed firm. "One seat left. That's it. You can put her on board, but you'll have to stay behind." Rian froze. His mind refused to process the words, "one seat." One dot. Mira peeked over his shoulder, her wide brown eyes frightened. "Papa," he forced a smile for her. "It's okay, Mira. You're going to be safe." Before she could protest, he set her gently on her feet and knelt in front of her. He brushed her hair back from her face. "I want you to be brave for me, all right? You're going to get on that ship, and when you wake up, you'll be somewhere safe. I'll come after you. Promise," she whispered. "I promise." The officer motioned for Mira to step forward. She hesitated, looking back at her father, but Rian gave her a reassuring nod. She walked toward the ship slowly, clutching the small stuffed animal she had carried since she was 3. Rian stood, ready to turn away, ready to face whatever was coming to the colony without her. But then something strange happened. A voice crackled in the officer's earpiece. He listened for a moment, his expression changing from impatience to confusion. He looked at Rian again. "What's your name?" "Rian Vale," he said cautiously. The officer tapped something into his wrist console, then straightened. "You're cleared. Both of you. Priority boarding." Rian blinked. "What? How? Don't know." The officer said, "Came through as an override order. Said to let you through immediately." Rian's stomach twisted. He had no powerful friends, no connections, and no reason anyone would put his name on a priority list. But there was no time to question it. The officer waved them on, and Rian hurried Mira toward the boarding ramp. Behind them, the crowd's shouting grew louder. Angry voices demanding to know why this man and his child were being let through. The moment they stepped inside, the noise outside was replaced by the hum of the ship's engines. The air was cooler, calmer. Rows of narrow seats lined the interior, each already occupied by exhausted colonists. The overhead lights flickered slightly as the power shifted to launch mode. Rian guided Mira to 2 empty seats near the rear. She climbed up and hugged her stuffed animal tightly, looking around with wide eyes. "Papa," she whispered, "why did they let us in?" He shook his head. "I don't know, Mira. Maybe we just got lucky." But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like someone had been waiting for him. The boarding hatch sealed with a deep metallic thud. Rian heard the officer outside shout something about clearing the area, and then the vibration of the engines grew stronger. A heavy pressure pushed him into his seat as the transport lifted from the ground. Through the small round window, he saw Colony 9 shrinking below them, the lights of the city flickering in the dusty night. Far away, Streaks of red fire lit the horizon where the first enemy ships had begun their attack. Mira reached for his hand. He took it, squeezing gently. "We're safe now," he said. Though the words felt uncertain, the transport broke through. The upper atmosphere, and the blackness of space spread out around them. Stars glittered in the distance, cold and silent. Rion felt both relief and unease. They were leaving the only home they had ever known, heading toward an unknown future. And somewhere, someone had made sure he got on this ship. The journey through space was long and silent. Most of the passengers on the transport ship slept or sat quietly, their faces pale from exhaustion and fear. Rion stayed awake, watching the stars pass outside the small window. His mind kept circling, back to the same question: who had ordered him onto this ship? Beside him, Mira had finally fallen asleep, her head resting against his arm, her small stuffed animal pressed against her cheek. He stroked her hair absently, but his thoughts were far from calm. Hours passed. The ship's engines gave off a steady hum as it crossed the black ocean of space. Somewhere in the distance, a cluster of bright lights began to appear. The Central Fleet, a group of massive ships gathered in tight formation. As they drew closer, Rion saw huge carriers and command vessels, their silver hulls shining under the artificial light of beacons. Military patrol craft darted between them like watchful birds. This was no civilian safe zone. It was a heavily guarded war fleet. When the transport docked, the passengers began to file out, guided by crew members toward processing stations. Rion picked up Mira and joined the line, expecting the usual routine: identity checks, temporary housing assignments, food distribution. But it didn't go that way. Halfway through the line, a pair of soldiers in dark blue armor approached. They stopped in front of Rion Vale. One of them asked. "Yes," he said cautiously. "You and the child will come with us," the soldier said. His tone was polite, but left no room for refusal. Rion frowned. "Why? We just got here." The soldier shook his head. "You have been requested." "By who?" Rion asked. The answer made no sense. "By the Empress herself." Rion stared at him, certain he had misheard. What? The soldier didn't repeat himself, only gestured for them to follow. Mira stirred in his arms, rubbing her eyes. "Papa." "What's happening?" she murmured. "It's fine, Mira," he said, though his own voice sounded uncertain. "They just want to talk to us." They left the civilian area behind and entered a section of the fleet he had never seen before. Here, the corridors were wider, the walls lined with glowing panels that pulsed with strange patterns. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, almost floral. At the end of the corridor, they reached a small shuttle bay. A sleek vessel waited there, smooth, silver, and unlike any human design Rion had ever seen. "Board," the soldier said. Rion hesitated. "Where is this going?" "To the Imperial vessel," the soldier replied simply. Inside, the shuttle was strangely quiet, with seats arranged in a circle rather than rows. The walls seemed to shimmer faintly, as if made from liquid metal. Mira sat beside him, her eyes wide as she looked around. The shuttle lifted off without a sound. Through the window, Rion saw the rest of the fleet shrinking behind them. Ahead, something massive loomed in the darkness, a ship so large it looked like a floating city. Its shape was unlike any human craft, sweeping curves, towers of crystal, and wings of light that extended out like the petals of a flower. "That's not human," Rion muttered under his breath. The soldier heard him. "It is the Empress's flagship. Few humans have ever seen it." The shuttle glided toward one of the glowing bays. In the moment it crossed the threshold, Rion felt a faint hum in the air, like the vibration of distant music. The bay was filled with strange figures, tall, slender aliens with shimmering skin, their eyes reflecting colors that shifted like oil on water. They didn't speak as Rion and Mira were led out. Some simply watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Rion's grip on Mira tightened. He didn't know if these were soldiers, attendants, or something else entirely. They moved through long halls that seemed alive. The walls pulsed with a soft light, and the floor beneath their feet felt almost warm, like stone that had been sitting in sunlight. Finally, They reached a massive door carved with flowing patterns. The soldier stopped and bowed his head slightly toward Rian. This is the audience chamber. You will enter alone. Rian's eyes flicked to Mira. She stays with me. The soldier hesitated, then nodded. Very well. The Empress will allow it. The doors opened without a sound, revealing a vast room that stole Rian's breath. The ceiling arched high above, glittering with strands of crystal that caught the light like stars. The walls were formed from layers of translucent material, with rivers of color moving inside them as though a live dot at the far end of the chamber. On a dais of silver and light sat the Empress. She was unlike any being Rian had ever imagined. Tall and graceful, her skin a smooth shade that seemed to shift from pale gold to deep bronze as she moved. Her eyes glowed softly, like twin galaxies spinning in the dark. She wore a crown that appeared to be made of living light, its threads moving gently as if in a breeze. The moment Rian stepped inside, she looked at him. Not at the guards, not at the room, directly at him. It was as if she could see through his skin, into his thoughts. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence was so deep Rian could hear his own heartbeat. Then, in perfect human speech, she said, "You will dine with me." The words were calm, almost gentle, but they struck Rian like a command. He swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. Round the edges of the room, alien attendants stood perfectly still, their faces unreadable. Mira pressed closer to his side, clutching her stuffed animal like a shield. Rian realized something in that moment. He was no longer just an evacuee. He had been brought here for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it had started long before he stepped onto the transport ship. The vast audience chamber was so silent that every sound Rian made felt too loud. His footsteps echoed softly on the smooth, silver floor as he walked forward. Mira clutching his hand. The air felt warmer here, carrying a faint scent of flowers he couldn't name. The Empress sat perfectly still on her throne, her gaze fixed on him as though she were reading something invisible in the air around him. Her crown of living light shifted gently, threads of brightness curling and twisting like flowing water. When he stopped a short distance away, unsure how close he was allowed, she spoke again. Closer. Her voice was unlike anything he had heard. It carried the warmth of a soft melody, but the weight of an order no one could refuse. Rian took a cautious step forward, then another, until he stood only a few meters from the dais. Mira stayed half hidden behind him, peeking at the tall figure on the throne. The Empress's eyes moved briefly to Mira, studying her with the same intensity. Then her attention returned to Rian. "You wonder why you are here," she said, her tone calm, almost conversational. "Yes," Rian answered honestly. "We were told to evacuate. Then someone made sure I was on that ship. I don't know why. I don't know who would care enough to." He stopped himself, realizing how small and unimportant he must sound in this place. The Empress tilted her head slightly. "And yet you are here, standing before me, when thousands of others were left behind." The words carried no cruelty, but Rian still felt a pang of guilt. He remembered the faces of those who had begged for seats. He swallowed. "I didn't ask for this. No," the Empress said. "It was I who asked for you." Rian's heart skipped. "You? What?" Her eyes glimmered faintly, and her crown brightened for a moment. "I sent the order that brought you onto that transport. Your name has been known to me for some time." Mira tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "Papa." "How?" Rian shook his head slightly at her, unable to answer. His voice felt dry when he finally spoke again. "I don't understand. I'm just an engineer. I don't have power. I don't even have a home anymore." The Empress stood. The movement was fluid, almost like a slow wave of water. She descended the steps of the dais, her long robe trailing behind her, shimmering, with colors that changed as she moved. When she reached him, she stopped close enough for him to see faint patterns in her skin, lines of gold that seemed to pulse softly, like living veins of light. "You are not here for what you have done," she said. "You are here for what you are." Her words sent a chill through him. "What I pay him?" The Empress studied him for a moment before continuing. "Your kind, the humans, are many and varied, but among them There are a rare few who carry something within their blood, a pattern that resonates with my people's own essence. That pattern exists in you. Rian blinked. You're saying this is biology, genetics? Yes, a rare marker, she confirmed. It allows a bond, not of flesh, but of thought, a bridge between minds. My people call it the harmonic thread. The phrase sounded strange in Rian's ears, like something out of a legend. She glanced at Mira, and in her as well, though still young, Rian instinctively placed a hand on Mira's shoulder, protective. Why would that matter to you? The Empress's gaze softened. Because a bridge between our kinds may be the only way to prevent the war that is coming. Rian's stomach tightened. War. With humans, her voice lowered. Not with all humans. But there are factions in your worlds that fear us. As there are factions in mine that despise you, they push for conflict. I push for peace. To speak across the gulf between our species is nearly impossible. Unless someone like you stands between us. Rian stared at her, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. You're saying, you brought me here because you want me to talk for you? To be some kind of translator? Not. Translator, she corrected gently, a living link through the harmonic thread. We can share not just words, but truth. I can see your meaning. You can feel my intent. No falsehoods, no misread tones, only understanding. The idea was overwhelming. Rian had spent his whole life fixing broken machines, not navigating alien politics. I don't know if I can do that. The Empress stepped back slightly, her expression unreadable. You will have time to decide. But understand this. There's danger. Those who wish for war will not want you near me. They will try to remove you from this world. That is why you and the child must stay under my protection. Mira pressed closer to him. Papa, I don't want to go back out. There, Rian looked down at her, then back at the Empress. If what you're saying is true, why me? Why not someone who's trained, someone who understands all this? Because the thread is not taught. It is born, she said simply. And you? Were born with it. The chamber fell silent again. Rian could hear the faint hum of the walls, as though the ship itself was alive and listening. Finally, the Empress gave a slight nod toward the guards at the far end of the hall. You will be shown to your quarters. Rest. Tomorrow, we speak again. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her throne, the living light of her crown flowing like a slow river. Rian stood frozen for a moment, his thoughts racing. He had come here with nothing but the hope of saving his daughter. Now, he was being told he might be the bridge between two civilizations. As the guards led them from the chamber, Rian glanced down at Mira. She was quiet, her small hand gripping his tightly. He didn't know if they had just stepped into safety or into the center of a storm far bigger than either of them could imagine. The quarters they were given were far grander than anything Rian had ever seen. The walls glowed with a soft golden light, and the floor was covered in a strange material that felt softer than cloth, but firmer than carpet. A wide bed, big enough for both him and Mira, rested against one side, and a window stretched across the opposite wall, showing a breathtaking view of space. Mira sat near the window, pressing her hands against the transparent surface as if she could touch the stars. Rian, however, paced the room, uneasy. Everything felt wrong. He had been brought here without explanation, told he carried something called the harmonic thread. And now he was in the private quarters of an alien ruler. The comfort of the room didn't ease his mind. It only made him more suspicious. Before long, a soft chime sounded from the door. It slid open to reveal a tall alien attendant dressed in flowing silver robes. In their hands was a tray of food, steaming gently. The Empress requests your presence, the attendant said in a voice that was calm and melodic. It is time to speak further. Rian hesitated but nodded. Mira comes with me. Of course, the attendant said, inclining their head. They followed the attendant through the glowing corridors, until they entered a smaller chamber, warmer, with walls of deep blue and strands of light woven through them like threads in a tapestry. A long table stood at the center, but it was not covered in formal decorations. Instead, it held plates of colorful food that looked like fruit, bread, and something that shimmered like crystal dot at the far end of the table. The Empress stood waiting. "Sit," she said gently, and they did. Mira stayed close to her father, but her eyes darted toward the strange dishes with quiet curiosity. The Empress gestured to the food. "You may eat. Nothing here will harm you." Rian wasn't hungry, but he picked up a small piece of bread-like food to be polite. Mira nibbled on a bright yellow fruit, her face lighting up as she found it sweet. For a moment, the room was quiet, and then the Empress began to speak. "My people have been watching your worlds for longer than you think," she said, her voice low and steady. "We study, we learn, and sometimes we intervene when danger grows too great. Long ago, before your species learned to cross the stars, we detected a rare signal, a resonance that came not from machines, but from life itself." Rian set the bread down. "You mean the thread?" She inclined her head. "Yes, the harmonic thread is not common even among my people. But in your kind, it is almost unknown. It is more than genetics. It is connection. To minds linked by the thread can share thoughts, feelings, even memories, without words." Rian frowned. "So, what, you're saying I could just read your mind?" The Empress's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Not read, feel, understanding without misunderstanding. It is a bridge across the deepest differences. My scientists believe that long ago, our species may have shared a common ancestor. If true, the thread is the last trace of that link." Mira tilted her head. "Does that mean we're a little bit like you?" "In a way," the Empress said softly, "and that is why you matter, right now. Our worlds balance on the edge of war. There are those in my court who believe humans cannot be trusted, and there are humans who believe my kind are monsters. But the thread offers proof that we are not so different." Rian leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. "You think me, being here, being this link, can stop a war?" "I know it can," she replied, "because I have felt it. Already, even without full contact, I can sense your truthfulness. And you, perhaps without realizing it, already sense mine." He didn't want to admit it, but she was right. As she spoke, there was something in her voice, an odd certainty, a weight that didn't feel like a lie. Rian took a slow breath. "Why bring Mira into this?" The Empress's expression softened as she looked at the little girl. "Because the thread in her is strong, stronger than in you. Because she carries it from the beginning of her life. In time, she could be more than a link. She could be a true bridge, one who belongs fully to both worlds." Rian's protective instincts rose sharply. "She's just a child. She's not going to be used as some political tool." The Empress did not flinch at his tone. "I understand. That is why I brought you both, so she would never be separated from you. Under my protection, no harm will come to her." Rian gave a short, humorless laugh. "And I'm supposed to trust that?" Her eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You will not have to trust my words. You will feel my intent. That is the nature of the thread. If I meant harm, you would know." Rian fell silent. The thought was unsettling, the idea that someone could not lie to him if the thread was active. But it also meant he couldn't lie to her. The Empress studied him for a moment longer, then stepped closer. "Rian Vale, I ask you to remain. Here, you and your daughter will have safety, food, and shelter. In return, I will call upon you when the time comes to speak for your people and for mine." Rian hesitated. "And if I say no?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Then I will return you to human territory, but outside my reach. There are those who will see you as a threat, and they will act before you ever see them." Coming, the warning settled heavily in his mind. If she was telling the truth, and the thread suggested she was, then refusing her could put Mira in even greater danger. He looked down at his daughter. She was eating quietly, her small legs swinging under the chair. She had no idea how big the choice in front of him was finally. He looked back at the Empress. "I need time to think. You will have it," she said, inclining her head. "But time is not endless. The storm is already moving." The attendant reappeared, ready to guide them back to their quarters. As they left the chamber, Rian felt the weight of unseen eyes in the shadows of the hall. Whether they belonged to protectors or enemies, he couldn't tell. One thing, however, was certain. The Empress had not brought him here out of kindness alone. There was a deeper game being played, and he and Mira were now pieces on the board. Rian barely slept that night. The quarters were comfortable, and Mira slept soundly beside him. But his mind wouldn't rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Empress's glowing eyes and heard her calm voice talking about war, peace. In the harmonic thread. It felt impossible. A day ago, he had been running through the dusty streets of Colony 9, thinking only of escape. Now he was on an alien flagship, being told he might be the key to stopping a war. And Mira, she was part of it too. That was the part that kept him awake the most. The soft hum of the ship surrounded him. Beyond the window, space stretched endlessly, speckled with distant stars. Somewhere out there were human worlds, alien worlds, fleets. Preparing for battle. In the morning, a gentle chime sounded from the door. The same silver-robed attendant entered and bowed slightly. The Empress requests your presence in the council chamber, they said. Rian stood slowly, careful not to wake Mira. But when he tried to leave her sleeping, she stirred and sat up. Where are you going, Papa? To talk to her again, he said quietly. You can stay here. Mira shook her head. I want to come. The attendant glanced at Rian and gave a small nod. She will be allowed. They walked through the winding corridors until they reached a new chamber. This one was different from the throne room, smaller, but still impressive. The walls were shaped into gentle curves, and a large circular table sat at the center. Around it stood several alien figures, all tall and graceful, their robes marked with shimmering patterns. The Empress was at the far end of the table. She looked up as they entered. Rian Vale, please sit. He took the chair opposite her, with Mira beside him. The other aliens watched silently, their expressions unreadable. The Empress folded her hands on the table. I have given you time to think. Now I will tell you my offer in full. Rian leaned back, bracing himself. You and your daughter will remain here under my personal protection, she began. You will live within the palace section of this ship, free to move as you wish within secure areas. You will be given private quarters, food, education for the child, and access to human comforts where possible. Rian narrowed his eyes slightly, and in return, her voice didn't change. In return, when I meet with human leaders, whether in person or across the distance, you will be present. You will serve as the link. Through the thread, you will let me understand them, and they will understand me. No words lost in translation. No lies hidden behind polite speech. True clarity. He sat quietly, turning it over in his mind. And if I refuse? Her gaze didn't waver. If you refuse, I will return you to human-controlled space, but beyond my reach. You will have no shield. There are forces, both in my empire and among your people, who will see you as a danger. They will not give you a chance to live. Quietly, Mira glanced up at him, her small hand clutching his sleeve. He thought of the colony's fall, the desperate crowd at the boarding gate, the way the officer's voice had changed when the override came through. Someone had wanted him gone from that planet, not just to save him, but to take him away. Rian shook his head slowly. You make it sound like staying here is the only safe choice. But how do I know I can trust you? The Empress's eyes softened, and she leaned forward slightly. You do not have to trust me in the way humans trust. You will feel my intent when the thread is active. I cannot lie to you in that state, and you cannot lie to me. That is the nature of the bond. He looked away, uneasy. That bond was both a weapon and a promise. One of the alien council members spoke for the first time. You should understand, human, if you agree to this, you will not only be a guest. You will be a symbol. Many will see your presence here as proof that our peoples can work together. Others will see it as a threat to their power. Rian met the alien's gaze. So I'll be a target, yes, the Empress said simply, but a protected one. He thought about it. Protection. On the most secure ship in the alien fleet sounded safe, but it also sounded like a cage. He would be under her watch at all times, and Mira, she'd be growing up in a place far from home, surrounded by beings who didn't look or think like her. I don't want her life to be decided by politics, Rian said firmly. The Empress studied him for a moment, then let her grow in both worlds. She will learn of yours from you, and of mine from my tutors. When she comes of age, she will choose her own path. That is my promise. Rian searched her face for any hint of deception, but there was nothing. Only a steady, calm certainty. I still don't like it, he said finally. But if what you say is true, refusing might put her in more danger than staying. Mira looked up at him, eyes wide. Papa, I don't want to go back to the bad place. I want to stay where it's safe. Her words hit him harder than the Empress's arguments. He exhaled slowly. I'll think about it, but I'm not giving you an answer yet. The Empress inclined her head. You will have 3 days. After that, events may move too quickly for choice to remain. The council members murmured among themselves. But Rian didn't try to listen. His thoughts were a storm. The attendant led him and Mira back to their quarters, but as they walked, Rian felt something else, eyes watching them from the shadows of the corridor. Not the calm gaze of guards, but sharper, colder. He didn't know who they belonged to, but he understood. One thing, whether he stayed or left, someone didn't want him alive long enough to make a decision. The grand hall of the Empress's palace was brighter than the sunlit skies on Earth. Golden pillars stretched high into the ceiling, covered in strange carvings of battles and triumphs from centuries. Past, every step that Rian took echoed in the vast space, as if the room itself was listening to him. His daughter Mira, holding tightly to his hand, looked around with wide eyes, amazed and a little afraid. Alien guards lined the sides of the hall, their armor glistening like silver. Water. Their faces were hidden, but Rian could feel their gazes following him ahead. On a high throne made of crystal and gold sat the Empress. She was calm, her long robe flowing over the steps like a river of starlight. The crown on her head sparkled with gems that looked like tiny galaxies. Step forward, her voice rang out, gentle yet commanding. Rian walked slowly, guiding Mira to stand beside him. His heart beat fast, but he tried to keep his face calm. The Empress leaned forward slightly, her sharp, curious eyes studying him. You have been under my care for many days now, she began. You have shared our food, walked our halls, and spoken with my people. Tell me, Rian of Earth, what do you think of my empire? Rian paused for a moment. It's different from home, he said honestly. Your people are strong, disciplined. The city is beautiful, more than I've ever seen. But, he hesitated, it feels heavy, like there's always someone watching. The hall fell silent. A few guards shifted slightly. Mira squeezed her father's hand, worried he had said something wrong. But the Empress's lips curved into a faint smile. You speak with truth, she said softly. Few would dare. She rose from her throne and walked down the steps, each movement smooth and graceful. When she stopped in front of Rian, she lowered her gaze to Mira. And you, little one, do you like it here? Mira looked up at the Empress with big, honest eyes. It's pretty, but I miss the sky on Earth. It's softer there. The Empress blinked, as if the child's words had touched something deep inside her. Slowly, she turned her eyes back to Rian. Do you know why I called you here that first day? Rian shook his head. It was not chance, she said. I have seen many worlds and many species. Humans, they are small compared to others, yet they endure storms, wars, and loss. They rise again and again. When I learned you boarded the last seat on the transport ship, protecting this child, I knew you were the kind I wished to meet. Rian frowned slightly, unsure where she was leading. Why? Because I am tired, the Empress admitted. I have ruled for decades. My people obey, but they do not question. They follow, but they do not dream. I want to give them something more, and I think you can help me. The words struck Rian like a wave. Me? I'm just a mechanic. I'm not a leader. I'm not important. The Empress tilted her head. Perhaps that is why you are the one. You know the value of a small life. You know what it is to lose. And to fight quietly. My generals, my advisors, they think in battles and borders. But I think it is time to think in hearts. Silence filled the hall again. The offer was not yet spoken clearly, but Ryun could feel it coming. "What are you asking?" he finally said. She looked him in the eye. "I ask you to stay. Not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as a voice in my court. Someone to tell me the truths my own people fear to say. Someone to remind me of the softness your daughter speaks of. In return, you and Mira will have safety, a home, and freedom here." Ryun felt the weight of her words pressing on him. It was safety, but not home. It was a chance to shape an empire, but far from the blue skies of Earth. He glanced down at Mira, who was quietly watching both of them, her small fingers gripping his. Mira spoke first. "Will we still see the stars, Papa?" Ryun smiled faintly. "I think we will." He looked back at the Empress. "If I say yes, I will speak my mind, even if you don't like it." Her smile widened slightly. "That is exactly why I ask." The Empress extended her hand, and after a moment, Ryun took it. "Then it is decided," she said. "From this day, you will be my advisor, and perhaps, in time, a friend." The guards saluted, their silver armor flashing in the golden light. Somewhere deep inside the palace, bells began to ring. Mira looked up at her father and whispered, "Does this mean we're staying?" Ryun squeezed her hand. "For now," he said softly, "for now, we stay." But even as he spoke, he wondered what new challenges would come. The galaxy was wide, and the Empress's words hinted at storms ahead and far above the shining city. In the dark reaches of space, something unseen was already moving toward them. The days after Ryun became the Empress's advisor passed quickly. He and Mira were given a home inside the palace walls, a small but warm set of rooms with a balcony overlooking the great city. From there, they could see the silver towers and the sky trains gliding between them. Mira often leaned on the railing, pointing out strange flying creatures or ships leaving for distant worlds. Ryun spent his mornings in the council chamber, listening to the Empress's ministers argue about trade, borders, and security. At first, they looked at him with suspicion. He was an outsider, a human from a distant world with no military rank or noble title. But when he spoke, they noticed he said what others would not. Sometimes, his words were simple, but they carried weight. One morning, while the council debated a tax increase, Ryun simply asked, "Will it help the people, or only fill the palace vaults?" The room had gone quiet, and the Empress had smiled faintly, slowly. Some ministers began to respect him, though not all. One evening, Ryun was in his quarters with Mira when the palace alarms rang. A deep, echoing sound shook the air, and the balcony glass shimmered. Mira jumped, frightened. "What's happening?" she asked. Before Ryun could answer, a voice came from the palace communication system. "Attention. All outer defense posts report unidentified ships approaching. All military units to stand by." Ryun's stomach tightened. He had heard enough in council meetings to know the meaning. This was no merchant convoy. The Empress summoned him to the command chamber. Immediately, when he arrived, the massive holographic map of space above the planet was already lit. Dozens of red markers moved toward the planet from deep space. The Empress stood with her generals, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "They came sooner than expected," she said when she saw him. "Who?" Ryun asked. The general beside her answered, "The Verkan Dominion, raiders. They take worlds that are unprepared, strip them of resources, then vanish into the dark." The Empress looked at Ryun. "I need your mind in this, not your hands. Tell me, what would you do?" Ryun stared at the hologram. "I'm not a soldier, no," she interrupted. "But you think like a survivor. That is what I need." He studied the red markers. "They expect you to fight them head-on, right?" "Yes," the general replied. "Then don't," Ryun said. "Make them think you're weaker than you are. Let them come close. Lure them toward the city. But keep your strongest ships hidden in orbit's shadow. Hit them when they're inside the trap." Some of the generals scoffed. "It's risky. If they break through, they will," Ryun said firmly, "if you fight them on their terms. You know your strengths. Use them." The Empress's eyes narrowed, but a small smile formed. "Prepare the Shadow Fleet," she ordered. That night, Ryun returned to Mira. She was sitting on the bed, holding the small wooden star he had carved for her months ago. Will we be safe? She asked quietly. I'll do everything I can, he said. Though he knew safety was never certain in times like this, the next day, the Vulcan ships entered the outer atmosphere, black and jagged. They moved like predators in the sky. From the palace balcony, Mira saw them and gasped. The city shields rose, glowing blue above the towers. In the command chamber, the Empress stood tall as the Vulcan leader's image appeared on the holographic display. A tall, armored figure with cold, glowing eyes. This world is mine now, the leader's voice echoed. Lower your shields, and I may let some live. The Empress's answer was steady. Come and take it. The battle began. The Vulcan forces pushed forward, their ships hammering at the city shields. The defense lines fell back as planned, drawing the attackers in. The Vulcan leader laughed, thinking victory was close. Then, from the dark side of the planet, the hidden fleet appeared. Dozens of silver warships burst into the battle, their weapons cutting into the Vulcan ranks. The raiders turned in confusion, their formation breaking. Rion watched the holographic battle from the side, heart racing. His plan was working until a sudden alarm blared. They've broken through a section of the shield, a guard shouted. A drop squad is heading toward the palace. Without thinking, Rion ran. He didn't know what he could do, but he knew Mira was somewhere in the palace. He reached the residential wing just as the walls shook from an impact. Smoke filled the air, and strange armored shapes moved in the corridors. Mira, he called. Pushing past frightened servants, from a side hallway, he heard her voice, Papa. She was hiding behind a pillar, her eyes wide. Vulcan soldiers were moving toward her. Rion grabbed a fallen guard's stunned staff and stepped between them and his daughter. He had no training, but survival gave him strength. He swung the staff, its tip flashing with energy. One soldier fell, the other staggered back. Before it could recover, palace guards arrived, driving them away. Rion pulled Mira into his arms, holding her tightly. I've got you, he whispered. By the time they reached the command chamber again, the battle outside was turning. The Vulcan ships were retreating, harassed by the hidden fleet. The Empress stood at the center, her calm unbroken. When the last enemy's signal vanished from the hologram, the room erupted in cheers. The Empress looked at Rion. Your ideas saved us, she said. And your courage saved her. She glanced at Mira, who was holding his hand tightly. Rion shook his head. It was your people who fought. I just helped them see another way. The Empress stepped closer, her voice low but firm. Then keep doing it. The stars are full of shadows. Like these, I will need a voice that speaks truth, even in fear. Rion nodded slowly. Then I'll stay, for her, and for this world. That night, the city celebrated under the glowing shields. Fireworks burst in the sky, and Mira laughed as she leaned on the balcony railing. Rion stood beside her, watching. The lights reflected in her eyes. They were far from Earth, but in that moment, under alien skies. They were home.